Hello you guys and welcome back to my channel. My name's Rebecca. If you haven't been here before, welcome. In today's video we are going to be talking about Hulu's Only Murders in the Building. It is that special time, that season again, when we are blessed with another season of Hulu's Only Murders in the Building. And if you like the show, then definitely continue watching this video. Before we get into it, if you haven't watched up until season 3 episode 5, then do not watch this video. There will be spoilers. We talk really openly about clues and theories that we have for the show so far. So yeah, definitely don't watch unless you're down to see some spoilers. I have videos for every episode of this season, last season, and then a sprinkling of season 1 as well. So make sure to go check those out. I will link them up above. And make sure to subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, the bell notification, comment, all those YouTube-y things. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of this season. We are halfway through season 3, so help me get there. Hit that subscribe button. Liking, commenting, all these things really help. Share with a friend. It would mean the world to me. With all that out of the way, let's get into season 3 episode 5, Love. So first things first, Joy is the narrator of this episode. I have noticed with the narrators this season, it kind of seems like they narrate the beginning and the end and like a sprinkling in the middle, but I feel like last season when people narrated, we were kind of given more of the character and them and who they are as a person, and this season it just seems like, I don't know, I don't feel like we got a lot of who Joy is as a character specifically from her narrating. So we start off the episode where Joy is smashing glass in Charles's apartment to create sea glass for her aquarium, and the trio basically asks Charles if they have asked Joy yet about the lipstick that they found in Ben's dressing room, because it's really suspicious that her lipstick was in there, especially after seeing, you know, fucking pig written on the mirror. So Charles is trying to work up the strength to ask Joy what that was all about. And so Joy says at some point during the intro, better to lose your mind loving than live your life loveless. So we've got this perspective that like she's a little crazy, a little kooky, or maybe that the show itself, like someone is willing to lose their mind for love. We also get a view of Joy's makeup area, and we notice that the lipstick is called Ruby Strippers. I don't know if this is a nod to this, but there is a show, it's a production called Ruby Strippers, and it's basically a production of The Wizard of Oz, but with like strippers, nudity, adults wearing no clothing. So I don't really know if they are related at all, but this is a thing. But I was just curious, I looked up the name, and so there is like a production of Ruby Strippers, but not a lipstick. So next we have Joy is talking to her fish. She's putting one of them in solitary confinement. We've got Charles kind of like opening the question of, hey, what was your lipstick doing in Ben's dressing room? Are you involved in this? And he really frustrates Joy because she feels like he's accusing her of murder, which he basically is. And she's like, seriously, you think that I could be a murderer? Like, what is the relationship we have if you don't really trust me? But at the same time, we have to remember that Charles literally dated a murderer, so he's been burned before. Saz arrives. She is back, and she has a really great relationship with Joy. They like call each other like silly names like Almond Joy and like all this stuff, so it's cute. It kind of reminds me of how I think Charles didn't like Saz in the past because Saz stole his girlfriend, so I was like, ooh, are we getting a little bit of that where Saz is like kind of into Joy? But they kind of seem like they're besties. And Joy leaves and decides that she's going to go to the cake tasting at Magnolia Bakery on her own because she just needs some space from him after he's basically accused her of murder. So she's hurt by this. Then we kind of move from Charles and Joy to Oliver arriving at Loretta's apartment and kind of like walking in. There's definitely some awkwardness there, some tension, not the usual like easy banter that we see between them, and Oliver accidentally ends up pulling Loretta's bed down like from the wall, and it like comes in. It's a Murphy bed, so that was a funny moment. And we also see that Mabel and Tobert are going on a date to stake out somebody that Tobert thinks is suspicious. And so Mabel shows up to this like pretty swanky restaurant, and Tobert's like, let's order some drinks, let's order some food. And Mabel's like, what's this about? Who are we staking out? Only to find that they are staking out Jonathan, who is actually performing at the restaurant that they're at, but that Tobert doesn't actually think Jonathan is suspicious anymore. He followed him around for a while, realized that he's a really nice guy, and decided, you know what, I just want to go on a date with Mabel. So that was the only way he knew to like definitely get her there. So Jonathan is Johnny J, and he is gonna perform for them, which is pretty cool. We flash back to Charles and Joy's place, I guess, but Joy has left, and Saz asks if we are sure that the murderer was actually after Ben Glenroy, and she says that the word on the street is that they were actually after Charles, that the person was actually trying to murder Charles, and that everybody just like kind of wants Charles dead, which is a jab at Charles in general. But also it's like, were they going after Ben? Like, was there someone else who was the target? It just introduces like a little bit of a different idea into our brains, which is interesting. Saz goes on to tell Charles that they're now dating Jan. That's, I mean, pretty shocking in and of itself, but we'll let that one slide, whatever. And we do flip-flop back and forth quite a lot through this episode. So back to Oliver and Loretta. They're basically having a terrible date. Loretta has cooked Oliver a bunch of solid food, which we know is not his thing. He's a dips man. He ends up losing a tooth in the pork chop that she gives him, and then he whistles through it and they both laugh, and you can kind of start to see the tension melting, which is cute. And this kind of moves them into a conversation about how she says she likes his little snort, which we know is like the Oliver Putnam thing. And she starts to say that she played a pig in Charlotte's Web, and that she played Snowball from Animal Farm. And then she says, she starts to mumble to herself, and she says, ah, fucking pigs. And then she says something along the lines of, you know who was a real fucking pig? Ben Glenroy. So it's just interesting that we've had the words literally come out of Loretta's mouth, and we've seen them on the mirror in Ben's dressing room. So it's really like in our faces that Loretta says this statement. And so Loretta, after Oliver's lost this tooth, asks him if he trusts her, to which he's like, yeah. And so they head out the door on their way somewhere else. Next, we kind of flash back to Mabel and Tobert, and through this time, Jonathan is singing. We only hear really the beginning, but a couple of different songs. We hear the song Just a Song at Twilight. We hear the song Meet Me Tonight in Dreamland. And I don't know what song the last one is from, but it says, Here, Let My Dreams Come True. So I just wanted to point this out because it is interesting that he sang 3 songs, and all 3 of the songs he sings mention dreams and dreamland. So it's just like, is it a coincidence that every song that Jonathan sings has to do with dreams? And are we talking dreams like sleeping dreams, or are we talking dreams like dreams of being on Broadway, dreams of acting in a movie? Like, what are we referencing here? But I think it's pretty suspicious that all 3 of the songs are about dreams. So we continue with Mabel and Tobert's date, where he is asking her why she hangs out with Oliver and Charles all the time. And she's like, yeah, they're my best friends. And he's basically like, what could you possibly talk about with these 2 old dudes? And she says, murder and how to connect Bluetooth, which, like, fair, connecting Bluetooth is hard. Saz makes Charles play Commit or Be Committed in his apartment. We kind of delve into why Charles doesn't want to marry Joy, why he wants her to move out, and we really find that the issue is that he literally cannot believe that someone could love him for him, and thinking that she loves him for him makes him think that she must be crazy. And Saz says this really interesting thing where she says, you're not afraid of capital J joy, you're afraid of little j joy, as in just like being happy in general. You're afraid, whether it's because it's going to be torn away from you, or, you know, it's just never ended well for you. That's, you know, that's what he's really afraid of. And this is kind of a big epiphany for him. We flash back to Oliver and Loretta. They are on the ferry where she says, you know, pick your poison, and she holds out a flask and a joint, and it's wrapped in purple, and Oliver's kind of taken aback because he's like, poison? What? Where? But we hear them chat about, you know, their lives before the musical, and we basically find out that they've been running in very similar and close circles for a long time now, and that they've crossed paths a few times. And Oliver's kind of like, I can't believe I didn't know you then. And Loretta's like, well, I knew who you were. You just didn't know who I was. And she says that she would have killed to be in one of his productions. She makes this reference to Merry Wives. It's another Shakespearean play. So this is what, like our 5th or 6th Shakespeare reference within 5 episodes. So that's kind of crazy. I think she says like, I would have loved to be in Merry Wives or something like that. And this play is interesting because it mostly talks about men impersonating women, men dressing as people's aunts, men dressing as people's wives, like men tricking other men by like looking like women. It alludes once again to the fact that like people aren't who they say they are. Like in this specific case, a man isn't who he says he is. Specifically, he's impersonating a woman in this, but could this just be a larger metaphor for like, this man isn't who he says he is? He's pretending to be something that he's not. So that was pretty interesting. Loretta continues on talking, making a joke about how she never made it into one of Oliver's shows, and says that they used to call her Lucky Durkin, but since she hasn't gotten cast in anything, she isn't feeling like she's so lucky these days. And she goes on to say that she must be cursed, and kind of says that if she is cursed, she deserves it. Oliver asks why she would deserve to be cursed, considering, you know, she seems like such a nice, kind woman, and she just doesn't really respond to him. And we're going to talk about theories of why she thinks she deserves to be cursed in the theories section. We move back to Mabel and Tobert's date, and Jonathan has come off stage. He's hugging some random guy, hands over an envelope. The guy gives him back a piece of paper, and Mabel and Tobert kind of like accidentally make a lot of noise, crash into a waiter, and then like Jonathan ends up seeing them and leaving kind of abruptly with this man who is apparently Dr. C and was Ben's doctor when he was alive. So Tobert recognizes him since he is the documentarian of Ben's life, I guess. We move on from Mabel and Tobert back to Loretta and Oliver. And you hear Loretta say, we were very tired, we were very merry, we had gone back and forth all night on the ferry. And this is from a poem called Recuerdo. And recuerdo is a Spanish word that means memory. What this means, I was thinking maybe she's like reminiscing while she's on the boat going back and forth. She was talking about her childhood and how her and her mother used to get on the boat, I think in Mississippi, and go down the river and toss their, like when her tooth fell out, and toss it over, like tooth fairy, boat fairy, ha ha ha. So she's talking about her childhood. She's having these memories of when she was young with her own mother, and so I just think that's relevant to the plot of the show itself. So we also have Oliver asking Loretta, you know, did you ever say to Ben, you know, you're a fucking pig? And she says that she did, because there was a night when she had a fight with him 30 minutes before the show. He had apparently told her that she was obsessed with him, that she'd wormed her way into the show, and that he didn't want to share the stage with a nobody like her, which is obviously really, really nasty. And after, you know, he said all this to her, he basically like physically grabs her and is pushing her towards the edge, where I think it's the scene where they fall from the lighthouse. And so she's on the lighthouse stairs, he's shoving her, and she yells, "Let go of me, you fucking pig." So we know that they had some sort of confrontation. We know that she yelled, "Let go of me, blah, blah, blah." And so it's very likely that somebody else in the cast could have heard them fighting and heard Loretta yell at Ben, "Let go of me, you fucking pig." Loretta says that he was an asshole, even to his kind-hearted brother Dickie. So we have a reference to Dickie here, where we know Loretta has a really soft spot in her heart for him. We'll talk about that later. And yeah, it's just interesting that there was this like scuffle in the theater right before the show. So Oliver and Loretta kiss, which, you know, cute. And then we kind of flash back to Joy and Charles, and she basically admits to Charles that she was backstage that night that Ben died, and that she had to cover a red mark on his face after someone had hit him. So she came back as the makeup artist that was around and covered that mark up, and she said that she must have just dropped the lipstick when she was in his dressing room. And this prompts Charles to actually tell the story of that night from his perspective. And he says that he was actually the one that hit Ben. Now, hold the phone, because this is crazy. I need to take a sip of my tea for this. If you have not watched my last video, you should go watch it because this is really cool. Last episode, we hear Bobo make a reference to a play called As You Like It. It's another play by William Shakespeare, and it's about a boy named Orlando, who in our situation would represent Ben, and a fight that he's having with his brother Oliver. They hate each other, they get into some sort of fight, and Orlando decides that he's gonna go fight the court wrestler because that's gonna somehow solve his problems. Oliver finds out that Orlando is going to fight the court wrestler and asks the wrestler to really seriously injure Orlando. So we have the wrestler and Orlando, who represents Ben. And what is the wrestler's name? Charles. Charles. They were trying to tell us via this reference to this show, As You Like It, that the one who punched Ben in the face was Charles, because they make this reference to this show where Orlando, who represents Ben, is going to go and fight someone whose name is literally Charles. So I just think that that was them trying to say, what was this red mark? Who hit Ben? It was Charles. And I just think that's crazy. Like, I feel like that was intentional. So now we know that the red mark is a punch mark. We know that Charles is the one who hit Ben, and we can guess that the person that Charles was telling Ben to stay away from her in like the first episode, was probably Loretta, because clearly Ben had some sort of vendetta against Loretta, and I have a theory why. So after all this, Charles ends up telling Joy that he accidentally proposed to her, but that he really, really wanted to be with her, and she basically is like, no, goodbye. She walks out, she puts cake on his shirt, all that jazz. We, go back to Tobert and Mabel shows Tobert her murder board, and we can like look at it and see all the different people that Mabel is suspicious of, and she's got all the good ones on there, and they end up kissing and going back to Mabel's room. We've also got the very end of the show where Loretta and Oliver are back at her place. They've clearly been doing the deed, and Loretta leaves to draw a bath, and Oliver decides to kind of like walk around her apartment. He snoops a little bit, and he finds first a photo of her and her mom standing on the ferry, which is, obviously what they did tonight. And then he finds the notebook full of like news clippings about Ben. And we first saw this notebook in the trailer. If you watched the trailer for season 3, this notebook was kind of in there. And so we see that she's got pages and pages and pictures of Ben Glenroy and information about Ben and where he is and what he's been doing. So that is suspicious. So now we get to go to the theory section of this video, which is always my favorite part. So the first thing we have to talk about is the fact that in the notebook where Ben is, we've got all these newspaper clippings of Ben. Behind every single picture of Ben, Dickie is standing next to him. It is relatively consistent. He's in almost every photo. So Loretta has all these photos of what seems to be Ben, but also includes Dickie. So this pretty much goes on with my theory to say that Dickie is Loretta's son. I really feel at this point that Dickie was actually Ben's adopted brother or half-brother, and Loretta had to give him up at birth. This would also make sense for the idea that Loretta feels like she's cursed and that she deserves it, maybe because she regrets having to give Dickie up at birth. And also, it's possible that she gave him to someone who was close to her. We know that she's Aunt Loretta, so is it possible that she gave him to her sister or someone in her family. Maybe she never actually met him because it was too painful for her, but he would write her holiday cards, you know, like write a card to Aunt Loretta, like send it to her. So we do know that she has like taken on this motherly figure in her life. She's this nanny, this motherly figure on stage. She's this motherly figure in this offshoot of Grey's Anatomy that she ended up booking. She just like is giving motherly energy in all these different ways. A lot of people agree that Dickie is Loretta's son and that he was adopted and is Ben's half or step sibling. So with all that said, this would also explain why Ben thought that Loretta was stalking him or being creepy. Maybe he felt like she was just there to get close to him, but in reality she was actually there to get close to Dickie. It's also possible that Ben found out who Loretta really was and that she was trying to reconnect with Dickie, maybe even take Dickie out of the situation that he was in where he was, you know, constantly being shoved around by Ben. And so Ben felt threatened by this and decided, I'm gonna confront her. She's trying to take away my brother. She's trying to take away my assistant. She's going to tell him things that are going to, you know, make him feel less loyalty towards me, and I'm the most important person. So he fought her, and that's when she called him a fucking pig, and that's when Charles punched him in the face. So with all that said, I think that is a pretty interesting theory that Dickie is Loretta's son. But it also brings up the question, did they kill Ben? Did one of them kill Ben? Did both of them kill Ben? I think that's where the question really lies. I do think that it's possible that, and probably my strongest theory right now is that Loretta and Dickie both killed Ben, but at separate times. I really feel like either Dickie decided to poison Ben to get away from him, maybe he was under contract, maybe Ben was too controlling, had pushed him too far, so he put the poison in the cookies in Ben's dressing room, and once Ben came back to life, Dickie was like, I don't know what to do with this guy. Like, he felt so guilty, so he decided, you know what, I'm just gonna tell Ben that it was me who you know, put him in the hospital, and I'm just gonna like take the consequences, because we see that Dickie does feel really guilty when he's in Ben's apartment on the top floor, like cleaning it out. He says, Ben, I'm so sorry, Ben. You know, so there is obviously regret and remorse there. But I think that, so he was going to tell Ben what he had done, and Loretta, in order to protect her son, even if he didn't know that he was her son, she pushed Ben down that elevator shaft to stop him from finding out the truth, and also to protect Dickie in the case that if someone did decide to say, you know, who attempted murder, she would end up coming out like it was me and just protecting him. Or vice versa, Loretta poisoned Ben. She was tired of the way that he was treating Dickie, her son. She had watched them from afar. She had always kept an eye on them, and she was tired of watching Dickie come in second place, basically. So she poisoned Ben to get him out of the way. Ben came back, knew that Loretta had attempted to poison him and was planning to hurt her or put her in prison or whatever. Dickie had found out that Loretta was actually his mother, and in order to protect her, he pushes Ben down the elevator shaft to stop him from hurting Loretta. And we've already seen that Ben was more than willing to go after Loretta since he physically went after her on stage. Maybe he was planning to kill her. So I think that there are going to be 2 murderers this season, 2 different murders. But I do think that they're related because of this like familial bond, mother and son. I also think at this point that there's only so many people who could actually be the murderer. We have a lot of like side cast in this season, and I just don't think that all of them are around enough to make them the murderer. Like, Bobo's not in it enough, Ty's not in it enough, KT isn't in it enough to be the murderer. So I think that the only logical people that it could be right now are Loretta, Dickie, Tobert, Cliff, Donna, Jonathan, or Howard. So that's 7 people, and that's a lot. But I do think that at this point, like, it's probably not Jonathan. It's probably not Donna and Cliff. So if we're looking at Howard, Tobert, Dickie, or Loretta, I think that those 4 are the most suspicious this season. Those 4 are the only ones who have enough like lines and have been in the show enough to give us a chance to guess. So I could see it being one of those 4. We do also have a lot of photos of Ben from Loretta's notebook, so I'm just gonna look at some of the texts. So one of them says, Glenroy to give commencement speech at St. Louis High School. I saw someone point out that Loretta is also from Missouri, so it's possible that, you know, if he's giving a commencement speech at a high school, it's probably because he's from the area. And so is it possible that he or Dickie or both of them are her sons? Okay, my camera is dying, but thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell notification, all those YouTube-y things. Like I said before, I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, and it would mean the world to me if you would help me out and hit that subscribe button down below. And if you have any theories about who killed Ben Glenroy, then please drop them in the comments down below. I love to read them. I love to hear them. Feel free to message me on Instagram. I love talking about the show with you guys. And I will see you guys next time with another video of Hulu's Only Murders in the Building. Bye, guys.